Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer, thanks to Smashman Videos for this one. Amy controls Faramir, Prince of Ithilien, and Roaming Throne, naming human. At the beginning of Amy's end step, can Amy choose two different opponents? During the chosen player's end steps, does Amy get to double down on the card draw or tokens? Okay, so first let's recall the definition of a triggered ability, which is just an ability with a trigger condition and an effect. They can be recognized by the use of one of the words when, whenever, or at. Looking at Faramir, we can see two uses of the word at, meaning that there are two triggered abilities, one that triggers at the end of Amy's turn and a second that triggers at the end of her opponent's turn. Based on this, it might be tempting to conclude that Amy would get to double both of those triggers, but it turns out that there's one additional complication that we need to be careful of. To see what I mean, let's compare Faramir with this other card, Keeper of the Accord. Notice how Faramir just has one big block of text, whereas Keeper of the Accord has two distinct paragraphs. That's significant because paragraph breaks are what Magic uses to separate different abilities. This means that Keeper of the Accord has two abilities, whereas Faramir only has one. If you're wondering how that makes sense when I just said that Faramir has two triggers, well, that's a great question. To answer that, let's examine in detail exactly what happens with each of these cards, starting with Keeper of the Accord. This card has two abilities, so at the beginning of your opponent's end step, each of those abilities will trigger. These are completely independent, meaning that if one of them gets countered, then the other will be unaffected. If you have a Roaming Throne, each of these abilities will trigger an additional time, during each end step. Now let's look at how Faramir operates. As noted before, it only has one trigger. This ability triggers at the beginning of your end step, and when it resolves, it will do two things. First, it will have you choose an opponent, and second, it will set up a different triggered ability to trigger at a future time. This second triggered ability is called a delayed triggered ability, and once it's set up, it just sits around in the game somewhere until its trigger event happens. In this case, the beginning of the chosen player's next end step. This discrepancy results in a couple of important differences in how Faramir interacts with some other effects, since its two triggered abilities are not independent. First, if you counter what I'll call the primary trigger, then obviously you won't be able to choose an opponent. But you also don't set up the delayed trigger either. Second, if you have a Roaming Throne, that will only cause the primary trigger to trigger twice, because the delayed trigger is not an independent, standalone triggered ability of a human that you control. It's a triggered ability that a human you control helps you set up, which is close, but it doesn't quite count. So with these two cards out, you would choose an opponent twice during your end step. This could be the same player twice or two different players. Each time you choose a player, it sets up a delayed triggered ability that will happen during that player's end step. And those delayed triggers will not interact with Roaming Throne. So if you chose the same player twice, you would get two triggers, each of which would draw you a card or give you tokens. Likewise, if you chose two different players, you would get one card or one set of tokens out of each of them. There's another interesting difference between Faramir and Keeper of the Accord in that the if statements on Keeper are worded as intervening if clauses. The consequences of this are a little outside of the scope that I wanted to talk about today, so I'll leave that discussion to the comments section. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.